Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode on Misfit TV. This is the Buckets Only podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jay, and I have my homie Jake on the other line. Jake, how are you doing today, my guy?
I'm doing very nice. How about you?
Bro, I'm chilling. We are back in the lab for another episode here. All basketball all the time, and we're down to the 8 final teams, and it seems like there's going to be a lot less coming up this weekend. So today we're going to do something a little different on Misfit TV in terms of our topics for today. We've had the normal overviews, we've had the normal previews and takeaways. We've even had a spin the wheel on here, but we're going to try a new segment on the podcast called Fill in the Blank. Jake, the game is as simple as the name states. I'm going to give you a sentence. In the sentence is going to be a blank. You're going to fill it in with whatever answer you feel like best fits. We're going to sit down, kind of talk about it, chop it up, and, just roll with it based on every question that we have. So we have a question for every series, just about. So I'm going to start with the Eastern Conference and go, Jake. The team that will represent the Eastern Conference in this year's NBA Finals will be.
Boston Celtics. They are, news came out yesterday that Gordon Hayward's back in the bubble. They're up 3-2 as of right now. Remember, we're recording this on Tuesday, so by the time you all see it, it could be a whole different story, but they look really good right now. The Raptors, I don't see them putting up a fight. And then I see Miami as a really good team. I just don't think they have what it takes to beat the Celtics. I think their guard play is going to be unmatched by the Heats, who have a good number of rookies in their rotation and guys that don't necessarily have that playoff experience. So as much as I like Jimmy, I'm going with Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics.
As a guy who made the pre-bubble pick that the Boston Celtics would go to the finals, I obviously have to stick with my pick, and I feel very confident in it right now. Honestly, looking at the trajectory of the NBA landscape as a whole, the Boston Celtics look at bare minimum like the third best team in the playoffs left, and I feel like that bears really well for them moving forward. Handling the Toronto Raptors obviously is the primary goal, and I feel like they're going to get that done by the end of this week. I feel like it's in the bag, and it's really just going to come down to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown playing out of their mind, and these are two guys that are more than capable of doing so. I feel like they've been the team to beat in the East for a little while, but the traction that an MVP, potential back-to-back MVP in Giannis Antetokounmpo, what he brings to the table is what's really shifted a lot of the magnitude towards the Bucks all season. But I feel like it was the Boston Celtics from the beginning of the year, and now they're kind of just showing out as to why. Moving on to the Western Conference, because let's be honest, I feel like Milwaukee is going to be out by the time that this episode drops. So I'm just going to kind of leave that alone and say that I put my confidence in the Heat to finish things up. So Jake, we're going to go to your LA Clippers for a second. Try to keep the homerism to a minimum. Actually, no, let it all out.
I think is overlooked about his performance is his defense. Like, not necessarily steals and blocks, which show up on the stat sheet, but he's going around picks, which is a good thing to see. He's really putting in a ton of effort on the defensive end as well. And when you're going up against two stars like Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, who we saw in I guess it was game 1 or game 2, they won off for like 44 points in the first half. Defense is kind of a big part of the game because as good as the Clippers offense can be when they're all firing on all cylinders, their defense has to be good enough to stop Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic.
I have to lean on the likes of the other superstar in this regard. I think they go as far as Kawhi Leonard takes them, and I feel like that's not a hot take. I feel like it's pretty obvious considering the trajectory of this team from the minute that he and PG landed in their lap as part of their roster. Kawhi Leonard had a pretty rough game too, and I feel like that's really the only difference that it made in the game in terms of the Nuggets being able to pull it out. Otherwise, we could be having a completely different outlook on this series in terms of the Clippers being up 3-0 and the trajectory of the Nuggets looking worse and worse, and being the question of, are they still physically or mentally fatigued from their first round series with Utah? I think there's a lot of different things that would look, significantly, if not drastically different, had game two been a little bit better for Kawhi Leonard. That showed in game three that as soon as he stepped up, came up big with the one finger block. I had to run it back about 3 or 4 times just to make sure, because they said it on the telecast, but I couldn't believe it. I mean, him playing effectively on both ends of the floor is really going to be what takes this team far, because their supporting cast is great. But at the end of the day, I feel like he's your team's closer. And if he's not putting up, you know, points respectively from quarter one to quarter four, those last 3 minutes get kind of dicey for him within the offense. And with no closer, the Nuggets can shoot the lights out of the ball when they get hot. And with no closer, that's going to be a lot rougher for the Clippers to seal the deal.
I think a lot of it comes down to effort, honestly. I mean, you saw like the Nuggets really play well the first like quarter, and then halfway into the second quarter, I think at one point they had like a 10-point lead, and then in a matter of minutes you saw the Clippers erase that lead and actually tie it up before halftime, and I think they were even winning, or maybe they were only like down by. It just comes down to a matter of effort and how much guys on either team want it, because we've all seen last year that if Kawhi wants it, he's gonna go get it. I mean, no one could have predicted the Raptors really would be winning the title at the beginning of last season, um, despite having Kawhi. And so I think if Kawhi really wants it, I'm like, I don't know. I'm still waiting for him to really like flip that switch. He seems like he's kind of not putting in 100% effort on the court each night, like we saw last year in his playoff run with the Raptors. I don't know if it's just that he's changed as a player with PG playing and he doesn't have to carry the entire load. Or I don't know. I'm still waiting to see if he reaches that next level.
Well, that's kind of why I'm glad that's where you like went with it, honestly, because I was actually going to ask you, are there any concerns that you had in terms of Kawhi's play or your team's play in general, in terms of why things like game two come up where you feel as though the momentum leans in your favor and the other team kind of takes it back? I felt like the same thing happened with the Mavericks series. Granted, Luka hits a 30+ footer 3-point shot over Reggie Jackson, and it starts flipping the minds of analysts all over TV with the idea that the Mavericks could finally start trying to give the Clippers a run for their money. And the reality is the Clippers were just a better team. And it seemed as though they kind of gave the other team, a fighting spirit that really should have never been there had they handled their business respectively. I think that's probably a great way to transition into my next question regarding the Lakers-Houston series, because it's been a tale of two teams in terms of looking at the way the Lakers have came out. I mean, game one, sniped off the bat again. Felt like the Trailblazers series all over again, where it's, are the Lakers are okay? Are they really potentially going to get upset? Game two comes in, they quiet all the crowd talking crazy noise. And game three, honestly, I feel like the biggest thing moving forward, really in general, game three and moving forward, is going to come down to the guard play of both teams. More so the Rockets guards in conjunction to the Lakers big men. I feel like the Lakers have not been playing to their size advantage, despite the fact that it is well scouted that they are just significantly bigger as a team than Houston. Question number three is, the player with the most pressure in the series between the Lakers and the Houston Rockets is who?
I gotta say, PJ Tucker. He has a lot of pressure having to play the 5 and guard AD, and I think really the Houston Rockets, like their success on defense depends on his ability to not necessarily stop AD, but to be able to contain him and not let him torch you for 35, 40 points a night. because, I mean, come on, no one really expects AD to be completely neutralized. But PJ Tucker, especially in the first game, we saw him kind of holding his own against Anthony Davis, and he kind of really, it seemed like he had it figured out. Of he was like just a big guy who was able to really body up with Anthony Davis in the paint. And then I mean, at least I didn't see as much of that in game two. So I think I think throughout this series, it's not going to be how James Harden plays. It's not going to be how Russ plays, although he has to get his act together. He's even said that he's just running around out there for now, trying to get back into the swing of things. But I really think that PJ Tucker will be the determining factor of this series. If he plays like he did in game one.
That's really interesting because you took a take very different from most people who would lean towards the superstars in this matchup. Considering it's a pretty star-studded series, I can completely understand why you lean on PJ Tucker because of the fact that game one really set the precedent. There were all these second level stats where it was AD never scored a point on PJ Tucker in any time where he was guarded by PJ. On the on two occasions where PJ was guarding AD, he got 2 steals, forced 2 turnovers in the game, and they ended up being pretty critical in terms of being able to put points up in game one. All these things came out making it seem like PJ Tucker was some AD stopper, which was like, it's a very good game defensively for him, and as a 6'5" guy, you have to commend him for being able to hang. But I kind of, I feel like the easy answer would be Russell Westbrook because of his fluctuating play. Game one, he's part of an 80-point trio outburst of him, James Harden, and Eric Gordon, and they win the game. And in game two, he has a relatively decent game, but they end up losing. And in game three, that's where the infamous "I'm just kind of running around" statement comes from, because the dude only puts up 10 points, and you're just wondering where he was in the fourth quarter. But I'm going to actually lean on the counterpart to PJ Tucker and go with AD himself. I think AD is the X factor for the Lakers because the Lakers are not playing through their bigs the way we would expect. Dwight Howard's not getting a ton of minutes. JaVale McGee was on the court for about 8 minutes this past game with no points, by the way. Most of their production came from LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Markieff Morris, and Kyle Kuzma. That was the primary centerpieces of their past 2 victories. And I think the biggest thing overall is just AD. He's the biggest difference in this series. In a series where the Rockets are playing small ball, who's the best big man in the league, let alone on the floor in general in regards to this series? It's Anthony Davis. 34 and 15 is amazing, and I think that that's something that's duplicable for him. Um, Stephen A. Smith said something in the last series against the Trailblazers that I feel like will stick for AD no matter what team they're facing in the playoffs, and that is, it's not about what AD does from a statistic standpoint. It's how he goes about doing it. A night where he might score 25 points, but he was 5 of 13 shooting or something like that, and just most of his points came from the free throw line, is a lot different than a 10 of 12 night, but he didn't meet the free throw line as often. They're different styles of play. They're different ways of having an impact on the game. I think the more effective, the more efficient AD is, the more likely the Lakers win this game. And with the fact that really their quote unquote best guard so far in this series has been Rajon Rondo of all people, that means AD's got to play really great in terms of putting points up on a regular basis. Where do you stand on AD in this series overall? Do you think that it's AD or bust, or is there somebody else on the Lakers that you feel has to be more effective in order for them to really close this series out?
Even some pressure put on him by LeBron saying, all right, like this is AD's team now. I'm going to kind of hand the controls off to him. Like we want to run the offense through him. I'm like a supporting piece. I believe he said that around the beginning of this season, like when they first traded for him. So yeah, I think that pressure naturally falls on him, especially when people look at PJ Tucker as a very undersized starting center having to guard him. People will naturally say, okay, well, if the Lakers want to win this series, like they're gonna have to play through AD, and so if he's on a roll, if he's playing good offense, I think that's ultimately why the Lakers win. If PJ Tucker is able to lock Anthony Davis down, which I don't think he should be able to in a 7-game series. But if he somehow manages to do that, I think the Lakers are really going to struggle because not only is Anthony Davis one of their 2 stars, but he's also like the dominant big man that they rely on. Like you said, they're not really turning to Dwight Howard or JaVale McGee. And so if they want to win the series, they're going to need their offense to go through the undersized matchup. And I think naturally that just falls right back on to Anthony.
Yeah, man. I think picking off of PJ Tucker, I feel like that was a really good alley oop into our final question in terms of the fill in the blank segment, which is out of all the series that are going on right now leading into this weekend, who do you feel like is the biggest X factor, whether it be a player, whether it be a coach, whether it just be a team in this playoffs? Who do you think is the biggest X factor, regardless of series left in these 2020 NBA playoffs?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Hey, man, gotta go big or go home on the last one.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because with the Heat, you could say that their entire rookie core is a group of X factors that they need to rely on. Um, with the Rockets, it's the play of PJ Tucker and Russ. But I'd have to say that I'd have to say that it's the guard play for the Celtics. They are probably going to be matched up against the Heat, who have Goran Dragic as their starter, which no disrespect to him. I mean, he's looked pretty good throughout the playoffs, but I think that if they're really going to need to kind of prove themselves, I'm not saying that they're bad or that they're unproven, but they really need to show why they get the respect that they get, and they really need to show like we're here, we can hold our own. Because I think Bam, like, so no disrespect to Daniel Tice, but I think he's going to struggle against Bam. Like Bam Adebayo is a young piece who I mean he's like a dominant player in the paint. And Daniel Tice has had a pretty good playoffs so far, but he hasn't really gone up against any like decent, like well-rounded centers. Like yeah, Marc Gasol was a really good center, but he's not in his prime. Same with Serge Ibaka, he's past his prime. Like they're both on the older, later end of their career. Um, so I think that the Celtics are not going to be able to rely on their big men as much. And Tatum's obviously going to have to go off for them. But ultimately, I think it's going to be the Raptors' guard play that it's going to have to carry the load for the Celtics on offense and defense. And if that happens, then I see the Celtics making it to the finals.
I think kind of piggybacking off of a similar series, like I genuinely think that it's the Heat, and it's because they can play spoiler alert because they've been doing it basically since they reached the second round. I mean, this has been a team probably going to end up closing this series out in Game 5 with the fact that Giannis is reported not to play. And even if they do so happen to hand the game over to Milwaukee, I still see them closing out this series before the end of the week, just because they have so many cracks at still taking that last game away. Miami is a team that plays spoiler alert because of the fact that they have the combination of veteran talent with young shooters and young athletes that I feel like can hang with the Celtics in a way where it makes me nervous as a person who picked the Celtics to go to the finals, because of the fact that I wasn't expecting them to play upset alert when it came to Milwaukee. I thought Boston was going to have to go through Milwaukee, and I just figured that Boston had way too many guys to throw at Giannis and way too many guys to put the ball in the bucket in comparison to the amount of guys that the Bucks have. Well, the Miami Heat have decided that they wanted to prove their own strength by doing what I thought the Celtics were going to have to do, but doing it a round earlier. And then, if for any reason the Miami Heat do advance, they're one of the biggest dark horses to advance to the NBA Finals since what, the '04 Pistons? And that team won the finals. So, regardless of who it is that they may take on in the NBA Finals, if they are to advance that far along, it's almost like I don't feel comfortable counting the Heat out all the way. I'm going to stick to Boston because I feel as though they're just a more well-rounded team with a lot more guys to really rise up to the occasion of an Eastern Conference Finals matchup. But it almost feels weird counting the Heat out because it seems like every single time we've done it this year, they've proved us wrong. Jake, where do you stand on the Heat? And I mean, how far do you think this team genuinely can get, considering that it really is the Celtics more than likely that it's going to be in their pathway towards getting to the NBA Finals?
I mean, the Heat, it's crazy that they haven't really lost their identity since LeBron left. Like, they established that winning culture, but then there was a good gap for a couple of years in between LeBron leaving and the big three being split up, and then their path back to relevancy again. And it's crazy that, like, by just bringing in Jimmy Butler, they really established that winning culture. And this is a team that, like, they don't care that they're the fourth seed. I mean, they don't they I doubt they look at the seeding. They're the fourth or fifth seed anyways, and in a bubble with no home court advantage, that's the same fate. There's no home court fans to have to go through if you have to play game 7. So the Heat, they're just there to play. They're not there to mess around. They show up, and I think Jimmy Butler is the perfect leader for that team. He's a veteran presence that knows how to establish a winning culture, but he also keeps guys in check, and he can mentor them, and I mean, he's like the outside of Iguodala, who is, I think, like 35 and like a really established, like, finals MVP winning veteran. Jimmy Butler is what you need for a team of young guys that you're trying to string together in difficult circumstances and win the playoffs. So it's a fun movie to watch, man. I mean, I'm excited to see this series if it is Celtics Heat. I think if the Raptors come back from the 3-2 deficit, which I don't see happening, but I think if they do, it'll be a much easier series for the Heat. But in the end, I mean, I think it's going to be a great series either way.
I mean, leaning off of that, we're just going to kind of take that into our question of the day. We have guys like PJ Tucker playing pivotal roles in series, Jimmy Butler, who is lifting a Miami Heat team that no one really saw coming until midway through the original regular season before the NBA stoppage. I mean, we have the Raptors, who, as of when we're recording this, still has a fighting chance in terms of forcing this into a game 7. The Denver Nuggets are a team who Jake's Clippers want to get out of the way quick, fast, and in a hurry, because I think a game 7 is the type of thing that nobody on that Clippers organization really wants to see, a Jamal Murray or a Nikola Jokic with all the marbles pushed to the center of the table. There's so many different guys that we could lean on in terms of potential X factors. So our question of the day to you guys is, who do you guys think is the biggest X factor player, coach, team remaining in the NBA playoffs right now? Leave them in the comments down below. Um, Jake, it has been another fire episode, my guy. If you guys enjoy this content, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Check us out on Misfit TV on Instagram. Things are picking up because we have the Culture Blitz podcast for football also springing up. Got a couple of episodes on the channel as well. Check those out. And we will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.